hostage was freed in Mali. 11 months later, the United Nations made a disturbing claim. The ransom used to free that hostage may have helped finance attacks on Mali. The amount was around $50 million. But the money didn't create the conflict. Jenim, the Al-Qaeda-linked group blamed for the attacks, was already financing itself through kidnapping, illegal taxation, gold and cattle theft. What the reported payment may have done was give an already violent organization more resources. And months later, Mali faced one of its most serious attacks in years. 6 locations were hit at the same time, and a senior finance defense official was unalived. But the most revealing part of the story wasn't the attack itself, it was what happened around the story. The territory was also attacking corridors that carried fuel into the country. And remember, Mali doesn't have a coastline. It heavily depends on its neighbors to keep fuel moving. The result was not simply another battlefield, it was a growing crisis for ordinary people. Fuel became harder to find, prices rose, electricity was disrupted, and thousands of families were already being pushed from their homes by the wider conflict. So what does the $50 million actually tell us about Mali's war? And why has a conflict involving guns and fighters increasingly become a battle over something much more ordinary? The roads people use, the fuel they need, and a supply line that keeps the entire country functioning. The answer starts with the money, and the money comes with the problem. There is still one big unanswered question. Who actually paid it? Reuters spoke to 3 people close to the deal, and all 3 pointed to the United Arab Emirates. But the UN report itself doesn't name a payer. The UAE hasn't confirmed anything publicly, neither has Mali, so that part stays unconfirmed. But the payer might matter less than what happened once the money moved, because the group that received it wasn't starting from nothing. The territorial group was formed in 2017 when several armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda in this region joined forces instead of fighting separately. And by the time this hostage was taken, the group had already built an extensive system for pulling money out of communities living under its control. Farmers and traders forced to pay what the group calls taxes. Gold dug up and sold quietly. Cattle taken from herders and resold. People kidnapped and held until someone paid for them. Now, that part isn't new either. Back in the early 2000s, ransom payments to Al-Qaeda-linked groups in this same region already added up to $90 million. So the $50 million didn't build anything from scratch. It arrived somewhere that already knew how to buy weapons, move supplies, pay people to fight. The question is whether that extra cash let an existing network do more over a wider area for longer. Months later, Mali got something close to an answer. On April 25, 2026, this stopped looking like a small insurgency operating at the edges of the country. The strategic lens covered these attacks in April, days after the attack happened. What nobody could say back then was who paid for them. The 6 places hit that morning weren't random. Kati sits right beside the capital and holds the main army base. The airport area in Bamako, then Mopti, Sevare, Gao, and Kidal. The furthest of them, more than 1,000 kilometers from the first. Mali's defense minister, Sadio Camara, was unalived by a car bomb at his home in Kati. You see, around the capital, Mali's soldiers held their ground. Bamako did not fall. Kati did not fall. And in August, Mali announced that 82 soldiers who had been held prisoner since April were finally freed and back home. But something else happened in the days after those attacks, and it is the part of this story that gets the least attention. Mali wasn't standing alone. You already know that after Mali's army took power in 2020 and 2021, the army cut ties with France, the UN peacekeepers, and Burkina Faso and Niger joined it and formed the AES. These 3 neighbors are all facing versions of the same armed network. They agreed that an attack on one of them is a problem for all 3. And coincidentally, earlier that same month, they announced that their joint force was growing from 5,000 to 15,000. So when Mali was hit in 6 places at once, that agreement got its first real test. Niger's government announced that the 3 countries responded within hours. carrying out what it called air campaigns over Gao, Menaka and Kidal. The United Nations Security Council's own reporting later noted that Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger had reportedly conducted coordinated airstrikes together. Burkina Faso's defense minister traveled to Mali to Camara's funeral and spoke there on behalf of all three countries. And in Niamey, around 1,000 people gathered publicly to stand with Malians. Then on the 15th of May, the UN Security Council issued a statement condemning the attacks and said something worth paying attention to. It called for the people behind them to be held accountable, and it didn't just mean the fighters. It named the organizers, the financiers, the sponsors, which takes us back to the money, because around this time, a number started spreading everywhere. Russia's Africa Corps, fighting alongside Mali, put the number at 11,000 fighters. Some reports rounded it to 12,000. The United Nations estimate JNIM's entire strength across Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso at 7,000 to 8,000, with about half of that inside Mali. Now, those two numbers don't match, and from the outside it is difficult to say which one of them is closer. But think about what that number means. If it was 11,000, Mali soldiers held the capital against a force bigger than some national armies. If it was closer to the UN's figure, then a few thousand fighters stroke 6 cities spread across more than 1,000 kilometers on the same morning. That is its own kind of warning. Either ways, what Malian troops and the forces fighting alongside with them faced that morning was serious. They held Bamako, they held Kati, and all that happened while the country's own defense minister was being unalived in his home. 6 cities, a government minister unalived. Soldiers were taken prisoner for months. Malian families, they lived every hour of it, and the men who stood in the way of it all were Malian too. And while everyone argued about numbers, something else was happening to Mali that reached far more people. Since September 2025, the attacks increasingly focused on roads, carrying fuel into the country. Supplies into 2 major towns, Kayes and Nioro du Sahel, were cut off. Fuel trucks and convoys were hit across 5 regions. Researchers at the Institute of Security Studies describe what was being done to Mali as asphyxiation, cutting off the air supply slowly. Mali has no coastline. Almost all its fuel arrives by truck, overland through Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire. Now, one research group has estimated that over 300 fuel tankers have been destroyed since the attack started. 300. Now, that was an estimate, not a confirmed count, but even a fraction of it explains what people in Bamako lived through. Queues at fuel stations, prices climbing, schools closing for long periods because there wasn't electricity to run them. You see, the government never lost control of Bamako. It never had to. For ordinary Malians to feel the impact of this war, the trucks just had to stop arriving. And that is what makes these attacks so serious. They take the fight between armed men and turn it into a crisis for people who had nothing to do with any of it. And we're talking about the trader who can't restock, the family that can't cook, the student whose school has no power. And the numbers are even hard to sit with. By late 2025, more than 737,000 Malians had been forced from their homes, and 500,000 didn't have enough food. Mali's own government counted 5.1 million people, more than 1 in every 5 Malians needing outside help just to get through 2026. Now, none of those people sat in a room and negotiated a ransom. And the money didn't stay in Mali either. Now, the network the UN traced this money to reached far beyond Africa. Yet, the Sahel, the belt of countries south of the Sahara, carries most of the human cost. In one recent year, more than half of people unalived by Tero happened in this region. A global problem paid locally. And Mali's own numbers hold something worth noticing. Recorded people unalived fell compared to the year before, which means the army and its partners are having a positive effect. What changed was the method used against the country. More of the harm arrived through blocked roads and empty fuel pumps. And it is spreading. In Benin, the number of people unalived linked to this violence rose almost 70% in under a year. So the roads at risk doesn't belong only to Mali. They run through Senegal, Guinea, Côte d'Ivoire, the countries whose ports and highways a landlocked Mali depends on for fuel and goods. So back to where we started. The easy version is that a hostage deal accidentally armed a terror group. But the word accidentally assumes things no one has shown. Who paid, what they understood the money would do, and whether money was all that changed hands, because some reporting says weapons and prisoners were part of the deal too. What is clear is that the terror didn't need this particular money to exist. It was already taking gold, cattle, and payments from communities under its control long before any ransom. What the 50 million may have done is give that existing network the resources to hit more places, more often for longer. And what that attack exposed was how much damage can be done to a country, not by taking its capital, but by cutting the roads that keep it supplied. Mali soldiers held the capital in April. Its neighbors sent aircraft within hours. The Security Council said financiers should answer for it, not just the fighters. All of that is real and none of it is small. But the fuel tanks are still being targeted, and the families pushed out of their homes are still counted in the thousands. Now that's the part that reaches beyond Mali. Look across Africa and count how many countries depend on a neighbor's port, a neighbor's highway, just to get fuel in and goods out. Mali is showing everyone what that dependence gets squeezed on purpose, which is why building stronger roads and trade routes between African countries isn't only about trade, and why three neighbors deciding to answer an attack together matters more than it might look from the outside. Because at the end, a road that can be blocked has one real answer: another road. And the countries that build those roads to each other are the ones nobody can cut off. If you haven't subscribed, I don't know why. I also noticed that many people haven't activated their notification bell. That's the reason why you don't get notifications whenever we post. So do that immediately. See you in my next video. Bye.